Now that 2018 is coming to a close and gamers, including my humble self, have chosen the best titles this year had to offer, it is time to divert our attention to the future. If the last console generation is anything to go by, the final years of a console cycle often feature many of the best and most influential games. Hopefully this gen will be no different, and the last drove of highly anticipated AAA releases deliver on their promise and end this generation with a bang. It's impossible to predict just how disappointing or fulfilling next year is going to be, but having a look at the games scheduled to be released or likely to be released next year, 2019 holds great potential for being another outstanding year for video games. Before I reveal my most anticipated games of 2019, I would like to point out that you shouldn't pay too much attention to the numbering. The games you are about to see appeal to me for very different reasons, and I can't give you a clear number one. I simply compiled a list of 10 titles that I find intriguing. I also decided to include games that are lacking precise release dates in 2019 or might not release in 2019 at all. As long as the possibility for a 2019 release exists, even if it's small, I put it on the list. As always, I'd like to encourage you to share your personal picks in the comments section. 2018 belongs to the past. New worlds are waiting to be explored. Here are my most anticipated games of 2019.
Rhody.
2019 starts off with a remake of one of gaming's most beloved horror classics, Resident Evil 2. Thus far, Resident Evil 7 is my favorite horror game of this console generation. Resident Evil 7 reinvigorated a type of old-school survival horror that's desperately missed. I'm extremely picky when it comes to horror games. Most of the allegedly best horror games of the past years left me completely cold, and to be honest, I'm not even sure if glorified jump-scare simulators like Slender Man and Five Nights at Freddy's should be considered horror games in the first place. Even Outlast did little to enrich the stale and bankrupt horror game genre, although I gotta admit the first one had some merits in comparison to the dreadful sequel. The only horror games I can think of that actually left a lasting impression on me since the original Dead Space are Amnesia and Soma. If it weren't for frictional games, the horror game genre would be pretty much dead to me by now. I never played the original Resident Evil 2, so this remake will be my first contact with Raccoon City. Unlike hardcore Resident Evil fans, I don't care all that much about the most faithful recreation of the original, since I haven't even played it. I'm simply hoping for a truly terrifying and challenging survival horror experience. From what I've seen, Resident Evil 2 seems to deliver exactly that. Even better, the game is only a couple of weeks away. This might not be an exact recreation of the PS1 horror classic in terms of gameplay, but it sure as hell promises to scare the shit out of Resident Evil virgins like myself. The only thing I'm worried about is how the characters and story of a 20-year-old PS1 game translate to present day. At any rate, next year is off to a good start.
It's coming back!
So you're awake. Looks like death is not your fate. Just yet.
Now don't tell me you are surprised. Of course From Software's next game is on this list. As many of you know, Bloodborne is one of my favorite games of all time, just like Demon's Souls and Dark Souls 1. The Soulsborne franchise has changed the way I think and talk about video games and will always have a special place in my heart. Naturally, I can't wait to get my hands on Sekiro. What makes Sekiro so incredibly intriguing is the fact that it marks the first major deviation from the original Souls formula in 10 years. Since the release of Demon's Souls, From Software has pretty much remained faithful to its Demon's Souls blueprint, apart from a couple of changes and improvements like the Estus healing system and interconnected level design in Dark Souls 1. Although I always considered Bloodborne its own beast, pun intended, the Dark Souls DNA is still a vital part of Bloodborne's identity. Despite their minor differences, Bloodborne and the Souls games have far more in common. Sekiro, on the other hand, may look like a Souls game at first glance, but upon closer examination it's remarkable how different Sekiro is compared to FromSoft's previous work. Sure, Sekiro still offers a high difficulty setting, intricate level and enemy design, and rich lore, but many of the distinctive characteristics the Souls games are known for have been removed. Arguably, stamina management as a core mechanic of Dark Souls and Bloodborne is nowhere to be found. Instead, Sekiro's combat system revolves around posture. The better you manage your posture, the more skilled and successful you're gonna be. Additionally, the story will rely more heavily on cutscenes and be less cryptic than usual. And most importantly, RPG elements and character customization barely play a role, if at all. The prosthetic arm allows you to switch between several attachments, but overall, every player takes control of the same character and won't be able to choose from a vast variety of different armor sets and weapons. Last but not least, Sekiro is a pure single-player experience, offering no chance for online cooperation or PvP. So I guess people who are used to summon help for difficult boss fights have to grow the hell up! In all seriousness, Sekiro's emancipation from the Souls formula is extremely exciting and unsettling at once. But as much as I admire the Souls games, I think FromSoft made the right call to take a break from Dark Souls and do something different. I hope Miyazaki eventually returns to the Bloodborne and Souls universe, but who knows, maybe Sekiro's just as good, if not better. We don't have to wait a whole lot longer. Sony Band's post-apocalyptic biker drama will be Sony's first AAA exclusive next year, when it releases on April 26th. I genuinely believe Sony Band is gonna deliver a high-quality game, but I'm still skeptical if Days Gone can reach the standards of Sony's other marquee exclusives. Call it entitlement if you wish, but exclusives like Bloodborne, Uncharted 4, Horizon Zero Dawn, Spider-Man and God of War have set an insanely high bar, and Days Gone will be compared to these juggernaut titles. As far as I can tell, Sony Band is still an underdog in Sony's world-class first-party network. Of course, I will reserve judgment until I've played the game. However, based on the footage we've seen so far, it seems like Days Gone will end up being a good game all things considered, but also fail to be outstanding in any particular aspect. The graphics look great, just not as good as Ghost of Tsushima's. The characters and story seem interesting, just not as good as God of War's or Last of Us Part 2's, and so on and so forth. I'm simply questioning if Days Gone can find a way to stand out under the shadow of other PS4 exclusives. According to the developers, the dynamic nature of the open world and emphasis on massive zombie hordes—
These aren't zombies, they're freakers, I thought I said that—
make Days Gone unique. It's perfectly conceivable that I'm underestimating Sony Bend. They've been working on this game for years and are clearly very passionate about it. Besides, fucking zombie bears, guys. Zombie bears.
These aren't zombies, they're freakers. I thought I said that.
Okay, more guns, more demons, more glory kills, and hell on earth. To be honest, that's all I needed. id Software's 2016 Doom reboot caught me off guard. Doom turned from a game I was barely interested in to one of the best games I've played this generation. Initially, Doom simply didn't speak to me. I'm not the biggest fan of metal music. To go even further, I really don't like it. I don't have a special connection to the original Doom or any of the early FPS titles from id Software. It's hard to say why I ended up liking this game so much. When I finally gave Doom a try, I became outright addicted to it. No cover mechanics, no interruptions by lengthy cutscenes, and no subtlety. id Software's return to Doom stays true to the design philosophy behind old-school FPS shooters. It provides an unbridled power fantasy and keeps the train rolling at all times. Maybe Doom's commitment to fast-paced, over-the-top FPS gameplay scratches an itch that hasn't been scratched in quite some time. Cover-based and more defensive gunplay has become the norm, and Doom offers the complete opposite: aggressive, in-your-face mayhem. But as bare bones as the premise of Doom is, namely Space Marine plus big fucking gun plus shitload of demons equals fun. The minute-to-minute combat actually involves quite a lot of skill. The game encourages you to keep moving and switch between weapons, utilizing your entire weapons arsenal. Doom Eternal doesn't have to do a whole lot to get me back on board. It seems to remove the few criticisms I had with the predecessor. Doom Eternal features a greater variety of environments, vastly expanding the Doom universe, a ton of new enemy and weapon types, and a grappling hook allowing for more vertical level design and strategic positioning during combat. In this case, I'm fine with more of the same. Obsidian's new project, The Outer Worlds, certainly belonged to one of the greatest highlights at this year's Game Awards. After Bethesda's public execution of the Fallout franchise in the form of Fallout 76, the game that keeps on giving the worst kind of gifts.
I read on the internet that our games have had a few bugs.
And one of the great things about having a fully dynamic game engine is all of this just works. I'm not kidding.
Obsidian's sci-fi RPG is desperately needed, even if it remains a spiritual successor to Fallout New Vegas and nothing more. To Bethesda's embarrassment, a vast number of people, including myself, regard precisely the non-Bethesda Fallout games as the best. Fallout 4 may not have been as broken and empty as Fallout 76, but as far as I'm concerned, it was a huge disappointment nonetheless. It was the game that revealed how archaic and unoriginal Bethesda's engine and open world formula truly is. And unlike Fallout New Vegas, it certainly doesn't deserve to be called RPG. It's an open world game with RPG elements, that's about it. Fallout 76 has completely killed my excitement and confidence in titles like Elder Scrolls 6 and Starfield. Despite having a smaller budget, it should be easy for the Outer Worlds to satisfy the desires of RPG fans. Until Bethesda gets its act together, I rather spend my hard-earned money on smaller yet finished titles like The Outer World. There's more than enough Fallout DNA to be found. Quirky humor, dubious characters, frontier spirit, and actual RPG mechanics. We are beginning to enter speculation territory. Ghost of Tsushima has no official release date and it might not release in 2019 at all. But it's certainly not impossible, since Sucker Punch has been working on the game ever since the release of infamous Second Son. Careful, unpopular opinion incoming, this game looks drop dead gorgeous. If Ghost of Tsushima actually ends up looking like the E3 demo, we are definitely getting an outrageously beautiful recreation of feudal Japan. The graphical fidelity and art direction are jaw-dropping. We don't know a whole lot apart from the basic premise. You are placed in the role of a samurai warrior who is forced to adopt a new fighting style known as the Way of the Ghost in order to defend Tsushima from Mongol invaders. Apparently, you start off as an honorable samurai and learn to fight from the shadows more akin to a ninja over the course of the game. In any case, Ghost of Tsushima's success stands and falls with its combat system. The recreation of 13th century Japan can look as pretty as it wants. It all comes down to the combat system and the activities the huge open world has to offer. Hopefully, Sucker Punch can fill the map with worthwhile side quests and side activities and doesn't resort to the standard practice of dumping a couple of dozen bandit camps and Yubi towers across the landscape. The combat is far more grounded and realistic than I expected. Overall, Ghost of Tsushima seems to be devoid of fantasy elements, which is something I welcome. There are more than enough games that go down the fantasy road, like Nioh and Sekiro. Normally I prefer a more arcadey fighting style, but again, there are already plenty of games doing that, so Ghost of Tsushima's emphasis on a historical setting and more grounded combat makes it stick out. Let's hope we actually get to play it next year. Common sense suggests there is no way in hell Death Stranding releases next year. I have a hard time believing Death Stranding releases before Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima, since both games have been in development longer and due to the fact that Kojima Productions didn't even have an engine when the first teaser was released. And while I'm still not convinced Death Stranding releases next year, a couple of fairly recent news stories suggest otherwise. The Walmart Canada League turned out to be nothing more than a placeholder. Norman Reedus is under the impression that Death Stranding could be ready for release early next year, but he's basing this assumption on the fact that he only has 3 more mocap sessions left. However, that doesn't necessarily mean the overall game development has entered its final phase. I don't know, I just don't see it. I hope I'm wrong though, God, I hope I'm wrong. Whether you like Kojima's work or not is almost irrelevant. Everything he does is at least extremely interesting. Kojima's unique artistic vision and insane imagination are a huge enrichment to the video game medium. In an age where artistic integrity tends to be compromised in favor of predatory business models and uninspired imitation of the current industry standard, uncompromised endeavors like Death Stranding are a blessing. And this is precisely what makes Death Stranding so incredibly intriguing, despite the few cryptic pieces of footage and information we have received. Among the annual releases of Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Call of Duty and Battlefield, original and unconventional titles like Death Stranding belong to the few games that might actually still surprise us.
And then came the next explosion. An explosion that will be our last.
Went out one night to make a little round. I met little Sadie and I shot her down. Went back home, jumped into bed.
Are you noticing a pattern? We may be in the final 2 years of the PS4's life cycle, but many of the most prestigious and popular AAA exclusives are yet to come. Ghost of Tsushima and Death Stranding are already highly anticipated exclusives, but I think it's fair to say Last of Us Part 2 as a direct sequel to one of the best-selling and critically acclaimed PlayStation exclusives of all time is bound to be the most successful, at least commercially. As a giant Last of Us fan, I feel a bizarre mixture of excitement and fear. On the one hand, I can't wait to see the characters again. On the other hand, even a marquee studio like Naughty Dog could crumble under the weight of its own legacy. After all, the ending of Last of Us 1 doesn't exactly scream sequel. But I'm willing to trust Neil Druckmann's judgment here. He is an incredibly talented writer. Look, in the end, Last of Us Part 2 is a Naughty Dog game. Of course, it's gonna be great. The real question is, can it do justice to its predecessor and generate a similar impact? It's not impossible, but also far from easy. Everything I've seen gameplay-wise looks extremely promising, if the AI doesn't receive a downgrade. For me personally, and I'm sure many PlayStation owners as well, this is one of the most important releases of the entire generation. Please, Naughty Dog, don't fuck this up.
See, I told you. He should be terrified.
Yes, I know, another PS4 exclusive. Call me a PlayStation fanboy if it makes you feel better, but maybe, just maybe, Sony's first-party studios make really impressive games. Just saying. It's not like I decided to like games like Uncharted, Last of Us, God of War and Bloodborne because they are PlayStation exclusive. In general, Sony exclusives tend to be the kind of games I'm looking for. And Media Molecule's Dreams is no exception. There aren't many games that can claim to be truly original and unique. However, I'd argue Dreams is one of them. Whenever you ask the question, can Dreams do X? The answer is probably yes. The amount of freedom in Dreams is beyond anything I could have imagined. I just didn't expect Media Molecule to go this far. The games have always been based on player collaboration and user-generated content, but never to this extent. Dreams is far more than a game, it's an engine. And even more, a game engine that's designed to work very intuitively. It's up to you whether you want to treat Dreams like a collection of games or as a tool to design your own games. In any case, Dreams will have a hard time finding commercial success, since it's promoting such an abstract concept far from mainstream appeal. Hopefully, the thousands of user creations keep the game in the news cycle in order to generate some sort of snowball effect. Media Molecule really is a treasure trove of creativity. Before you say anything, yes, I know, Cyberpunk releasing next year is unlikely. Like all of CD Projekt Red's games, Cyberpunk 2077 is incredibly ambitious. Furthermore, the studio has set the bar of open-world RPGs ridiculously high thanks to the tremendous success of Witcher Wild Hunt. People expect great things from Cyberpunk. To be honest, I don't care when Cyberpunk releases. If it ends up being just as good, if not better than Witcher 3 in terms of world design and especially side quests, boy oh boy. Shut up and take my money. I wouldn't be surprised if CD Projekt decides to release Cyberpunk on both current gen and next gen hardware. I don't know, the gameplay demo looked too good to be true. I'm not sure if a PS4 or Xbox One can handle this. The only aspect of the demo that concerns me a little bit is the combat. Witcher 3 was one of the best games I've ever played, but the combat system definitely wasn't without its flaws. Let's hope CD Projekt nails the gunplay. If Cyberpunk actually releases in 2019, alongside all the other games in this list, 2019 could be the best year of the entire console generation. Which is why it's most likely not gonna happen. But you never know. Anyway, please share your most anticipated games in the comments section and tell me if you believe games like Cyberpunk and Death Stranding could release next year. And yes, before you ask, my next video is the long-awaited Red Dead 2 review. For now, happy holidays.